to you, fellow viewers and Africans joining us this afternoon. It's Views on the Continent on Afric Media, and today we wish happy feast to all of our Muslim brothers and sisters celebrating the feast worldwide, in Cameroon especially, because we are celebrating today. Now today we are looking at the Anglophone crisis. We're looking at another angle today. Just recently about 9 international and national rights groups came together, or probably signed a letter, wrote an open letter, signed it and sent it to the United Nations Security Council. Now they are asking them to include Cameroon formally on the agenda. Remember that there was a meeting that was held to discuss the crisis of Cameroon, the crisis that has been plaguing the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon in May. That's on the 13th of May. That Monday they came together, they discussed the crisis, but then this meeting wasn't a formal one. Now what these people want is a meeting that is formal, in which, where decisions are taken, the government is going to recognize them, because there was some issue of if these decisions or whatever came up from the meeting that was informal should be recognized by the government and the whole world. So they are urging the United Nations Security Council and its non-permanent members to discuss the Anglophone crisis formally, to bring it up each time they want to talk about crisis in the world, and to get people who actually update them every day about the situation on ground. So what does all of this mean for Cameroon? Now, before we get into the program and I introduce you the panelist who is going to be here with us in the studio, I would like us to listen to this report. It was done by Big Bang Louis. He has been following the issue or the situation closely, and he did this report for us. Take a listen.
9 international and national human rights organizations have written an open letter to members of the United Nations Security Council, asking them to formally add Cameroon to its agenda as a regular standalone item. As the United Nations Regional Office for Central Africa meets for this week's briefing, the groups also think it is an opportunity for the Security Council to urge the Cameroon authorities to investigate and prosecute members of the security forces alleged to have carried out human rights abuses. It should also publicly assert to armed separatist groups that their leaders will be held responsible for serious crimes committed by their fighters. The issue of access to Cameroon and its affected regions also was brought up by the groups. They want the Cameroon government to allow unhindered access to international and national human rights organizations. On Monday, May 13, 2019, United Nations Security Council members held an area formula meeting on the humanitarian crisis in Cameroon. The meeting was organized by the Dominican Republic, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the USA. Cameroon's Anglophone regions have been engulfed in crisis since late 2016, when English-speaking lawyers, students, and teachers began protesting against what they saw as their underrepresentation in and cultural marginalization by the central government. In response, government security forces have killed civilians, torched villages, and used torture and incommunicado detention, while armed separatists have also killed, torture, and kidnapped dozens of people. The groups that signed the letter: Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect, Action by Christians for the Abolition of Torture, Committee to Protect Journalists, Nouveau Droit de l'Homme Cameroon, and Equally World Organization Against Torture, Equally Presbyterian Church USA, and the Central Africa Human Rights Defender Network.
Thank you so much, Big Bang Louis. If you're just joining us, it's Views on the Continent on Afric Media, and today we are wondering why the United Nations Security Council is taking such a long time to add the Anglophone crisis, or probably Cameroon, in all on its list of countries that have crises that they should be looking at and seeking how to address them on its agenda. And he's talking about, these organizations are talking about a formal addition, not an informal one that was done, remember, some time back in May. So Why is the UN Security Council taking so long to formally add the Anglophone crisis to its agenda? Just to remind you, this program is an interactive one. You can join us using the numbers on the screen to participate. Tell us what you think about the crisis in Cameroon, the developments we've had so far, and the way the United Nations Security Council has been approaching the crisis. The lines are open. Let's receive our first participant of the day. Hello to you and thanks for joining us on the program. Hello and thanks for joining us on the program. Okay, we have some difficulty getting that caller. I don't know what's happening in the call center. Can we have that caller?
This is Show calling from Yaoundé. You see, the UN Security Council has been too weak in solving international issues because for long we've had international crises that have been watered down by this same body. And again, the Anglophone region had been for so long without UN's direct intervention, and the Anglophone region have been asked for direct UN intervention to solve this crisis, but they have not been able to attend or to adhere to this problem because we're still waiting for them to come in and solve the problem. Yeah, that is why the 9 human rights bodies have the right to write. I mean, they wrote to the UN complaining of what they call a silence over the Anglophone issue, and it is time for them now to intervene because if they don't intervene, the situation will go worse and worse, as Lali said. So that is the situation on the ground, and I would think that if an international body, the United Nations Organization, cannot intervene to solve current socio-economic and political crisis in nations all over the world, then they are paving the way for more violence than what they did in Rwanda during the Rwandan genocide that killed thousands of people, and that's what they are still seeing. They are still waiting to see in the Anglophone regions of this country before they can intervene. I think that it is the time for a new international body, the reformation of the United Nations, so that a new international body can come up and try to solve this international crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shu Gerard. He's joining us from Yaoundé. Thanks for your contribution. If you're watching back home, you can equally join the callers. We have another one. Hello to you and thanks for joining us on the program.
Good afternoon, Gina. Good afternoon, televiewers of Afrique Media. Gina, thank you very much for this wonderful topic. Anyway, we appreciate the efforts of the International Human Rights Organization and the National Human Rights Organization also for sending an open letter to the United Nations Security Council Organization. Gina, what I can say concerning this is actually the United Nations Security Council has been taking a long time to react to this Cameroon situation because you know, if we go carefully by this situation, we have been crying for a very long time. And these things, because they are all part of them, because in the Security Council, you will see Cameroon as a representation also in the United Nations Security Council, whereby we had a representative who was actually giving a reason for the United Nations Security Council not to participate in actually functioning to assist the crisis itself. So these are just a few reasons. I think the Security Council has been reluctant to actually include this in their agenda because they thought maybe since the government bench of Cameroon keeps on counteracting their proposals to actually assist, they keep on telling them no, it's an internal issue. So they will come to, for them it was as if the United Nations Security Council is interfering at a time meanwhile they are not supposed to come since they consider it as an internal issue. But then we keep on seeing as the reluctancy for them to come, it keeps on worsening on daily basis. As we speak to you now, Gina, every day the situation is aggravating. So for me actually it comes a time when I think this organization sometimes they should overcome these relationships and try to send out some representatives to actually do research on what is actually going on in the field. Because if we keep on assuming on things like this, Gina, a time will come where one particular area will be swept out totally in this well. So I think this is just the reason why the United Nations has been reluctant. And moreover, too, they have their own benefits. You know, all of these nations, when things come up, the countries, we all, usually other countries who have suffered from refugee crisis. Cameroon also has been a support. Central African Republic, they suffered that. Cameroon also was supporting them. So Cameroon was collaborating with the United Nations. So with all of these things, it is not easy for the United Nations Security Council to actually intervene directly like that. So we see all of these things. These are the things. It's like, for example, if we have a very good relationship and something happens tomorrow, it will be as if I'm backbiting if I come to support you. So I think this is just the main the main aspect why they are taking reluctancy to come. But we plead, that's why we much appreciate on this international human rights organization, if they should come up to actually put
We've blessed, thank you so much for your contribution. Now, joining us in the studio to talk about everything happening in Cameroon and what these rights groups have been saying so far is Mr. Far Elvis. He is a journalist, he is a politician, he is of the civil society and many others. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Gina. It's my pleasure marking present here, especially when it concerns burning issues where our lives are being lost. And that's why I say that this is not time for politicking. This is time to get things straight. This is not time for speech making. This is time for action for the killings to stop. And so any action carried out or put in place by the government or any organization that has to be revolving around meetings and speeches, I tell you, more lives will be lost, and they have been lost as the hours are ticking. Okay, now, the first question is, don't you think it's time already for the United Nations Security Council to start discussing Cameroon formally on its agenda, but not formal meetings, not area formula meetings where the government is going to come up and say, no, it wasn't formal, so the decisions that were arrived at during the meeting doesn't apply to us. In fact, we do not recognize it. Well, I think that it's a call for concern. I have been very bitter with the United Nations and other foreign organizations that seemingly tell me that they only act where interest is concerned. If this crisis was going on in Libya, if this crisis was going on in Syria, or if this crisis was going on in Iraq, where oil is there and many other endowed resources, I'm sure that the action would have been quicker. But for the fact that in the international politics and international diplomacy, the issues of interest are revolving around, it therefore explains why there is that lukewarm attitude. But then, we have always been saying that those kind of organizations should quite do their job by preventing disasters from occurring than allowing disasters to occur before they come in with their so-called humanitarian aid. Of course, when you look at those who have been displaced in the northwest and southwest, many taking refuge in the 8 French-speaking regions of the country, for those who are found internally, you realize that many of them will tell you, even those who received some aid in Yaoundé some few days ago, tell you that aid does not help them because what matters is they need to go back to where they're coming from. And so when you give somebody mattresses, the question we ask is, where do you expect him to go and stay when you have burned his houses, or when you have burned their houses rather, and so many other things? So it becomes a call for concern. So international community is fast sleeping, and we have said earlier on several platforms, Gina, that the manner in which the state is dragging on this crisis tells you that the state cannot solve this crisis, whether they like it or not, and therefore it needs a third party, and urgently. Now, do you think there will be a difference? Like, will there be any changes? Will the situation probably change if the United Nations formally adds the anglophone crisis in Cameroon on its agenda? If they start talking about it, are we going to see some changes on ground? Obviously, if the United Nations takes the anglophone crisis on its agenda, you discover that the aspect of genuine dialogue that each and every Cameroonian has been clamoring for will obviously come to limelight. Remember that the state has shown no intention of getting genuine dialogue. I said earlier, before the Prime Minister went out to Northwest, Southwest, before all the government officials have been going to North and Southwest, they know the problem because they have various channels through which they know what the problem is. President Paul Biya had been at the helm of administration for more than 40 years. I'm talking about away from the president. He has worked as Secretary General, Director of Civil Cabinet at the presidency, and he has held several capacities. So when we talk about people going out, it's a delay tactic. And the more we keep delaying, is the more people keep dying. And I tell you that in conflict, it metamorphosizes as time goes on. From where people started with peace plans, now to cutlasses, now to locally made guns, now to AK-47. The next thing is, you don't know, in the months ahead, you might start getting them coming with bombs. You might start getting them coming in with maybe machine guns. And so it becomes very complex. And so the state is not wise enough. That's why a third party, if this issue is discussed at the UN, the next issue will be for the UN to lay platform for negotiations. And by so doing, it will compel the government to do so. And I said earlier, where we are now, because the government's action has brought about lack of trust in its execution and in the manner of handling this crisis, it tells you that wherever genuine dialogue will be called for, I tell you, Gina, the venue of the discussion will not be Cameroon. The venue of discussion will be decided by both parties in a neutral ground with a neutral mediator who will be in to get it. It's for Cameroon.
Mr. Fa, I'm sure you've read, or probably not actually read the letter, but then I'm sure you've heard about the letter that the Ambazonia interim, no, not interim, the Ambazonia president or leader, who is currently in prison, wrote. He was proposing some venues. He was talking about New York, Addis Ababa, and he actually proposed some mediators, including English, the British, I beg your pardon, and the French. That's Britain and France. Now, do you agree that the venue and those involved actually going to play a big role if we want to talk about mediation or dialogue in the future?
Obviously, yes. I went through the letter put in place by Sekou Tabe Julius, who is currently in detention. And I went through the lines carefully, and I realized that he was very much in line with the proposals I've always been saying. I have not precised in my outings where the meeting will take place as he proposed, which was good. But I said that there is no genuine dialogue that can take place on this national territory, because it will require those in the diaspora who have a hand in the conflict, and for them to come in, their security must be guaranteed. It will require France and Britain, because they are the main cause of this problem. I've told people several times that if France and Britain did not come in to partition us, beginning from the period of the annexation period, from the German colonial period to the French and the British colonial period, we should not have had this problem where we are today. Therefore, the partitioning, putting us half-baked cakes, you put somewhere, and then you take people and sit and place under others, and then you said they have come together, whereas they were all crooked games put together. It tells you that our suffering today is because of the foundation put in place by these colonial masters. And therefore, Gina, we cannot hold any genuine dialogue when these masters are absent. And besides that, as I said earlier, the key actors in the conflict, that is the government itself, and those within the territory, and those in the diaspora, must be part and parcel of that genuine dialogue. If not, I tell you, we'll be holding meetings for no good reason. So the venue decided or proposed by Tabe and by the President Sekou, it's a good area, but the main thing is that a genuine meeting to hold, it must take place out of the country.
Okay, thank you so much for throwing more light on that. Let's get back to our participants who are eager to join us and have their voices heard. Remember, the numbers are on the screen. You can join the others as well to contribute. We have another caller. Hello to you, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Hello, Gina. Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Elvis. This is Nguema calling from Douala, Cameroon. You know, this thing is something that people have been crying for the UN Security Council to step in and to see how they can solve this particular Anglophone problem once and for all. It is because many things has been happening, a lot of atrocities that have happened, and we need a quick response to this particular crisis. We thank God that 9 right groups, they have stepped in and they have written to the UN Security Council for them to step in and to solve this Anglophone crisis once and for all, because that is what we have been crying and we have been waiting for. But I have a great problem here with this Security Council. When you look at the members of the Security Council, that is the permanent members, when you look at the likes of China, the likes of Russia, the likes of France, these are the people who have been supporting the government for all these atrocities. Last time, Russian and Chinese, they said that the UN or the US should not be intervening in anglophone crisis, or other organizations should not intervene because the US, the Cameroon themselves, they are capable of solving their problems themselves. Now look at it critically. Are these the very persons who can stand up to solve this crisis, in which they are the ones who have been sponsoring, they are the ones who have been promoting this crisis for it to continue? I have a greater problem here. But I know that these are the main problem. These are the people that can solve this particular problem. When you look at these members, the only person who is capable is only US and UK, because these are the main people who have been saying things, who want this particular crisis to be solved, and who have even struggled to chip in their voices so that it should be heard, so that this crisis can be solved. That is what we have been praying, and that is what we want every organization to also force this UN Security Council to solve this particular crisis. I don't know if UN Security Council is not capable of solving this crisis, then I bet you the UN Security Council should be dissolved, and other organizations that can solve crisis in Africa and crisis in the world should step in. Because when you look at Africa now, Africa is gradually becoming a war zone. It is not only in Cameroon. When you look at Algeria, we look at Sudan, and look at the rest, even Cote d'Ivoire, many crises have been happening. Look at the recent one that is happening in Sudan, where the military, they have refused to hand over the power to the civilians that they want them to rule. Now look at it critically. This is the real time this UN Security Council were supposed to step in to solve this crisis before it escalates. Look at it now. When you look at the number of people who have just died in Sudan just for how many months, you are going to realize that these people, they always want crisis to escalate before they want to say something. They want properties and people to die before they can step in. It is either they solve this crisis in Cameroon or something else. Thank you, Gina, and have a wonderful day.
Marcel, now let's come back to our panelists in the studio. Mr. Fa, now the international and human rights and national human rights groups also mentioned that African countries who are on the Security Council, you know, some African countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Equatorial Guinea, and I think South Africa, are non-permanent members of the UNSC. Now, they said they have a crucial role to play in facilitating mediation efforts. Do you think this is so? And how do you think these members have been reacting so far? We're talking about 3 years already, and the crisis keep on getting worse.
Let me tell you sincerely, Gina, I am disappointed with those countries. My disappointment is at its peak. I remember the period when South Africa was going through apartheid. Cameroonians wept. The images we saw with the white minority, the way they maltreated the blacks, differentiation of the schools between the white and the black schools, each and everyone wept when we were still very young and in school. I remember each time they played the South African anthem, people wept. It was a collective effort for all African countries weeping for what South Africa was going through. But after doing that, today South Africa enters xenophobic practices. Fellow Africans are being killed, and the South African government stays and watch. At the same time, Cote d'Ivoire, when Cote d'Ivoire was going through hell, Camerounaises themselves were deeply concerned. Thousands were killed in Bouaké, many were killed also in Abidjan, and it was a general call for many African countries. Today is the case of those in the English-speaking area, and the African countries are playing politics to it. It tells you that Cameroon is on its own. And that's the more reason why no country wants to take the bull by the horn. For the other countries, Russia and China, they stay aloof because according to them, their interests will be tampered with in Cameroon. And therefore, let the killing go on. It is a call for concern because at a time when international community is playing a jigsaw puzzle on a period where people are killed, I keep on saying that it's because those in Yaoundé don't have relatives who are directly concerned. If at a point in time, The Minister of Defense had his nephew killed in the northwest southwest. I'm sure it will not be where we are today. If at a point in time a general had one of his relatives abducted in any of these areas, I'm sure the general will not take things lightly. But on the other hand, as I said, Gina, African countries we are naming are staying because it's a pact they sign and a game they play. When you look at a situation whereby governance is questionable, in a period whereby some people were protected at the time, like in the case of South Africa where it was a concern for everybody, and today South Africa is playing at a distance, it tells you that there are several games going at the background. But the question now is, do we fold our arms when we rely on the African Union? It fails us. Regional organizations, we talk about, we have CEMAC here. That's another toothless bulldog organization. They too are just watching. No country. Remember, Gina, when Central Africa was in problem, Cameroon played a major role. People had a concern, both from northwest, southwest, as to the killings going on between the Seleka and the Baleka rebels. Today, now that it's the turn of Cameroon, even the Central Africa itself is staying quiet. Equatorial Guinea, where we had people rushing there and coming back, is quiet. It tells you that it's a fight that must be maintained only by those that are concerned. Therefore, the bad thing in it is that all souls matter. If you see America coming in as people castigate America, I said America has an interest in the Gulf of Guinea, yes. But the American issue here is that a stitch in time saves 9. To them is that if you don't harness the issue now, it will cause regional conflicts because Nigeria is affected economically. I doubt what they're doing because goods are used to use the Bamenda Enugu corridor road was to facilitate business transactions between Cameroon, Nigeria, and the other West African countries. Now it's no longer going. Business people have been cut off. Nigerians who used to invest in Nigeria can no longer do that, especially those who are in Bamenda and Northwest and Southwest. And therefore, it has a huge economic damage on the Nigerian economy. But then, when we talk about loss of lives, Gina, the question is, do we sit and keep on saying that we should be waiting for the international community? Of course, I told you that we have an irresponsible army. Because if you look at the issue in Libya, when Gaddafi ordered one of the lieutenant colonel to go and carry a bombardment, the guy looked at it and thought that and saw that it was not good. He flew the plane over to Malta, and he served with other army officials from Libyan, from Gaddafi's government. At the same time, in Gambia, during the period of Yahya Jammeh, when he ordered the military, the army chief of staff, to fire back when ECOMOG forces were coming in, ECOWAS forces, of course he refused and asked the military to go back to their barracks. In Ivory Coast, during the period of Laurent Gbagbo, of course, Laurent Gbagbo gave orders for the army chief of staff to fire back and to get armies to resist when they were carrying out the incursions to overtopple Gbagbo. The army chief of staff refused and took refuge in the French embassy. It's to tell you that there are periods where you're supposed to have what we call military that's responsible. In Algeria, the military refused killing civilians, just like in the case of Sudan. Now the question is, when you are sent to burn houses, must you burn houses? Of course, not all the military are carrying out that exercise, but I want to tell you that a majority of them take orders, and they could as well say no. But patron, c'est que vous m'envoyez d'aller faire là, ce n'est pas bon parce que ce sont nos frères, nos sœurs. But I tell you, Gina, that while we rigmarole around these issues and praying that the issue goes to the table of the United Nations, as other people are crying our fight, you can imagine if international organizations are crying our fight, it means that the elites who feed far from the regime are sitting there in Yaoundé are devils incarnate. Because if somebody comes to feel for you, why they themselves are not feeling, I said, Gina, why we call for the international community to assist us, the main thing is that the challenge I give is for the next session. It's coming up next week, Parliament and Senate. If senators and parliamentarians, especially those from the 8 regions, don't take the houses hostage for this anglophone crisis to be discussed, it means we are 2 different countries operating.
I'm going to come to the government and probably parliamentarians and senators, something linking to that.
Okay.
A statement that was made by Barrister Akere Muna. But then before we get to that, let's just complete or probably conclude with the international community. Now, some political observers say probably the world hasn't learned from what happened in the past. We have countries such as Sierra Leone, Liberia, and even Rwanda. Rwanda just celebrated 25 years after the genocide, and lots of people died. So they these observers say probably the world hasn't learned and is waiting for, they always sit and wait for a crisis to aggravate when they see that it's not within their control and so many people have died. That's when they come in, the international community stops sitting down and just saying we are urging you to start taking concrete actions. Do you think Cameroon might suffer the same fate?
Yes, Cameroon might suffer on one hand and might not suffer on the other hand. Gina, you understand that with the issues of international community functioning and its operations in other member states, you know, the main thing is that we said when you are a party to an international treaty, the international law to which you are a part to it overrules or overshadows the national laws. Meaning that in terms of hierarchy, international law is superior to national law. That explains why if you are a treaty to Geneva Convention, if you are a treaty, if you signed some treaties concerning human rights, it becomes but normal that the moment there are evidence that you have gone against the treaties you signed, the member states are automatically supposed to intervene in your country, not to be a matter of internal affairs. And that's how it's supposed to operate. But now, as you said, Gina, the worrying issue here is because in international politics, there is interest. Now, there are countries that want to come in. If you look at China, China is concerned with its business. If you look at France, Bolloré is functioning well in Cameroon. Of course, Britain is trying to carry out some underground business transactions in the country. And so, because of the positions and the interests most of these foreign countries have in Cameroon, just like they will have in other African countries, it explains why when issues are about to be brought at the international organizations level, they make sure they block it. Because when you bring out the limelight, they might force it to come into action and they will lose some of the benefits they have. That's why I said that to an extent, the white man is not generous to help Africans. We don't fabricate guns. If you look at the guns we are showing on the image there from Boya, those are long-range guns that could shoot as far as almost a kilometer. So you realize that we don't fabricate any. Even the AK-47s, we don't have them. So it tells you that there are issues being cooked up such that international community itself, the countries you are citing here, will obviously stay lukewarm because they have an interest. I tell you, Gina, if we had vast rich oil field, maybe 5 or 6 positions around us with already existing gold mines present, the countries would have been fast to come in.
Okay, now thank you so much. Let's get to our viewers. We have Derek. Mr. Derek is joining us from the USA. Welcome to the program, sir.
Okay, I'm happy you guys have had me on the show. I would like to make this little contribution. You know, the anglophone crisis right now, the crisis working the south and the northwest in our country, Cameroon, it's a very painful one. We keep looking and we are talking about interventions and things of that sort, but there is a crisis within the anglophone crisis. Like we keep talking of dialogue, but the question is, who do we dialogue with? Who is the international community going to dialogue with? Because if you look at the crisis right now, we have the separatists, and the separatists are not all talking from one voice. They have several groups which their leaders do not agree. They don't see eye to eye. And separatists, they believe that the federalists should not be welcomed on the dialogue table. So, if we are talking about dialogue here, if the international community decides mounts pressure and the government of Cameroon calls for dialogue, I'm actually wondering who is the government of Cameroon or the international community going to dialogue with, because definitely there are several separatist groups and they don't agree, their leaders don't see eye to eye. They have not been able to see eye to eye. We cannot talk about going to a dialogue table when the Anglophones themselves don't speak one voice. If the Anglophones are not able to unite themselves and then they are talking about dialogue, I'm wondering who the international community and the regime of Yaoundé is definitely going to dialogue with, because they don't want to see Abu Bala, who started the struggle. Separatists have blacklisted him. They don't want to see him. Every other initiative that does not buy separatist ideas are not welcomed. The separatists themselves, they don't agree. So you see the degree of confusion and disunity in the struggle. That's why I say there is a crisis in the Anglophone crisis. Till the Anglophones, we have been able, till the day we'll be able to sit on the same table amongst ourselves, whether be it separatists, federalists, or unionists, till we reach the point where we'll be able to sit amongst ourselves, then we can start talking about dialogue. But as of now, Anglophone community is not ready for dialogue. It's not ready for dialogue, and it's a pity that the deaths and destruction are happening, and their leaders are unable to come to a compromise or to sit on the same table and agree. So it's a very painful situation. So I don't think if there's anybody to blame at this point in time, it's the regime in Yaoundé or the international community. We should stop blaming blame. The blame should come on us ourselves. We are not ready for dialogue. We cannot be talking about dialogue when we are not ready. The fact is, and it remains, we are not ready for dialogue. If we cannot come together and talk in one voice, then we cannot discuss with anybody.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Derrick. Thanks for your contribution. We have another caller on the line. Hello to you, and thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Yes, hello. So
Hello.
welcome to the program. Please tell us who you are and where you're joining us from.
Hello.
If you can hear me, you are already on air. Go ahead with your contribution, sir.
To contribute on your conversation that we're having right now. I just want to say that I categorically disagree with the previous caller, because that previous caller is distorting the fact. The fact is, he can't say that there's nobody to dialogue with, or that there's a problem within the Anglophone problem. There's no problem within the Anglophone problem. If you don't know who to dialogue with, you won't know who to kill. So if you know who you're killing, then you definitely know who to dialogue with. So what I'm suggesting is the government should take charge. They should stop pretending. They should stop lying. Because the separatists could also say the same thing about the government. When the Prime Minister says one thing, the Minister of Interior of Territorial Administration says something different. Should we believe? Who should we believe? Or who should the separatists believe? Or who should the unionists believe? Who should the federalists believe? There's discussion everywhere. The thing is, people have to have the common decency to sit down and talk to each other. There are people who represent Ambazonians. There are people who represent the separatists. There are people within and without Cameroon who represent both sides. So let's just go to the table and have a conversation. So I also want to agree with what your guest is saying there. All these people are taking their time sitting in Yaoundé at their comfort, going back to their family at the end of the day and talking with their family members, having a good time, having dinner, having lunch, having breakfast together. But they send their army to go die for them when they're not willing to make a move, to make a change, to make sure that there is peace within the country. They're letting other people die for them. It's right. If one of their kids would die in this struggle, things would change. If one of their family members would die in this struggle, they'll look at it differently. Okay? When people come to the African media and say, oh, they've lost friends, they've lost this, shut up. You haven't lost anything. You don't care about those people who are losing their lives. Okay? Let's face facts here. If you cared about people who are losing their lives, you would make a change. You would be for the change that we all need. And the change that we all need is that the peace reigns. I don't care what the peace situation would be, but people have to sit on the table and talk to each other.
That's what is needed now. And Cameroonians, like the Americans say, they have to take their own destiny in their hands. If you're in the military and you're going on the front lines, you're basically putting yourself in danger, because the ministers, the governors, and the generals who are sending you there do not care about you. If they cared about you, they know what to do. They know exactly what to do, and they're refusing to do it. So let's stop kidding each other and stop putting the blame on, oh, who should they talk to? When this whole thing started, there were people who wanted to talk. They know those people now. They knew them back then. So why are they distorting the facts and asking who to talk to? Just talk to the people you already know are present to have a conversation. That's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. It's just people don't have the willingness to do this. Okay? Since this started, how many times has President Biya
your contribution? Let's receive our last participant of the day before we get back to the studio. That's Mr. Mukete Primo. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon to all the televiewers of Afrique Media. Mukete Primo calling from Kumba, Cameroon. Gina, it's a pity that we have been crying foul just because of this Anglophone crisis. It is a pity. That is why we keep on saying that the UN is a toothless bulldog that bites but cannot bite. We have 5 big nations that forms the United Nations Security Council, and to them they consider France as one of the biggest, as one of the main nation that controls the UN Security Council. That is where the problem lies. It is a good idea that 9 right groups have stepped up their legs or their toes, that this crisis of Anglophone should come to the table so that it can be solved once and for all. But what was the purpose of the UN? The purpose of the UN was created because it will be there to prevent conflict. It will be there to make sure that conflicts do not affect the world, the global world. But at the end of the day, they haven't achieved a dime on whatsoever they are doing. They haven't achieved anything. It is a pity. What they were supposed to do, they are not doing it. And other parts and other organizations are doing it. But some people will still sit behind and criticize that US should not step in. UN should not interfere in people's affairs. Whereas they have seen that the situation is deteriorating each day, each and every blessed day. A soul is lost in Northwest and Southwest. Don't mind. Maybe the Francophones think, or the regime think that it's only the Anglophone that are losing. They too are losing their loved ones. Every day they are losing a soul. Be it from the gendarmerie force, be it from the rapid battalion, be it from the police force. They are losing their loved ones every day.
Studio with Mr. Fa Elvis. Mr. Fa, tell us what you think about what Barrister Akere Muna said yesterday during a roundtable discussion at the Normandy World Peace Forum yesterday. He was talking about the fact that the Cameroon government lacks the will for true dialogue, hence the worsening of the Anglophone crisis, which is already in its 3rd year. Now, do you agree with him?
Well, I think that Barrister Akere Muna is moving in line. He's in line of duty. And as I said earlier, let nobody deceive you that the government is willing to get genuine dialogue on board, because these issues started along. What have people not said? Even the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he had called the head of state 5 times. It's on record. Many have spoken. Americans have spoken. Now organizations are speaking, and the government is lukewarm. Therefore, what Barrister Kere said is just the fact. And that's why I said that the period for politicking is over. Because the moment we keep politicking is the more we politic at the detriment of lives that have been lost. Gina, many of us have left our villages. My sick mother cannot be in the village because of security reasons, and we are forced to accommodate her elsewhere. That is just part of it. Many persons are staying where they were not supposed to stay because of the condition. And that's why I said, Gina, that if you look at it critically, if we say that we are suffering, if those in Yaoundé had direct impact, or the impact on the ground, northwest, southwest, touched them, Gina, this problem would have been solved along. Don't mind as you see them making meetings in Yaoundé up and down.
Okay, now I would like us to rush through our questions before we go, because they are very important now. The crisis is worsening, as we just said, and in some parts of the country, we are beginning to see this divide between the Bororos and the Christian community. Lately, there was an incident in Wum, and as a result of that, there was a lot of destruction, and some people were even killed. Now, what do you have to say about this divide? What happened in Wum? Actually, what do you have to say about this situation in Wum that has been on almost everybody's lips? In Wum, we have the Bororos taking machetes and moving around, but then they were accusing the Ambazonia fighters for killing one of their own. Now we're having a divide already. What's your thought about this whole divide thing?
Well, I think that the issue of divide started on the part of the government. The government has often used the system of divide and rule to weaken the people, and that we understand, because even the elites that were supposed to protect us, the government bought them over, and they are now working against an interest. Evidence. They should have been at the forefront clamoring in Yaoundé that please let this thing end, but they are quiet. Now, in the issue of the divide over in the Legnos, just as I'm saying, as I'm talking now, I said we lost lives every day. Yesterday, some persons were about 5-6 of them were killed. Kumba, Boya Road, on the highway there, they said the secessionists killed. Good. We see lives lost. Now, also now today, we had some 3 persons from Balikumbat who were killed somewhere around on their way to Babungo. Also, lives being lost. So if you look at it, the issue of Nyos. Now you realize that, Gina, in the crisis that erupted in Nyos, where they said some gunmen went and attacked the Bororos in Nyos, killing their animals, destroying their houses, it was a fact. Who were those involved? We don't know. But the government of the North region said inquiry or a commission has been put in place. You see, the delay reports.
And you gave them 1 week to report.
They gave them 1 week to report. And before that, even the Bororos started reacting. Now, in front of, at the entrance of GTHS, Wum, houses were burnt. An old man was burnt, suffering from injuries now. And then if you get the video footages, it tells you that even when the guy started, they passed through the gendarmerie, passed through the military barracks, and you realize that the worry now is, why is the military not fully involved to get these Muslims under control, so that they don't carry out harm that would cause the Ambazonian fighters to come for return march, which will be very bloody. So there is a game going on, Gina.
Okay.
That's why I say that the government is not taking its responsibilities. The tribal war we are going to have in Nyos would have been prevented if, after that burning, when these guys came out with machete, and you see them videotaping and talking about how they are going to carry out this and that. The question now is, if their houses were burnt by Ambazonian fighters, the civilians the Bororos go to attack, are they Ambazonian fighters? With an old man, I saw him, they say who was set on fire and is barely struggling to move, accompanied by military. Now, we are saying here that in the issue of Nyos, the administration in Wum has failed in its duty. And my worry, I keep crying every day, is that if care is not taken, if the government does not deploy troops on time, what if these Ambazonians come back with their AKs to fight those who have cutlasses? Gina,
indeed, yeah,
it will be bloody. And it could go over to other areas whereby some Fulanese Bororos want to say that no, because our brothers were killed in Wum, now want to attack here. So we are getting into a genocide whereby the government is watching and making communiques instead of deploying the thousands of troops they say they have into the troubled area.
Now, Mr. Fa, before we go away, we have just 2 minutes for the end of the program. Now, you are a journalist. At such a time when journalists are being persecuted, but then how do you think they can contribute in their own little way in preventing this crisis from escalating? You know how powerful the media is. What should our journalists be doing, be it on traditional media or social media, and activists as well? What should be their role at this time? Should they start helping to preach peace? And because it's really getting out of hand.
Well, the only thing the journalists can do now, as some of us are doing, is just to speak the truth. Because when you want to preach peace, they say you have been paid to preach peace. Whereas you are simply doing your job. And so it becomes very complex. So to me, the only thing the media people can do is just to report as it is. But if you are paid, whether by Ambazonia or paid by the government, to report a one-sided question, you spoil the whole issue. And that's where we find ourselves, because most of us have taken side. Some are Sadina, some are anti-Sadina. And so it gets the whole system complex. But when you call a spade, the government is forced to get up from sleep and then does his job. Just like we expect the government to maintain peace and security in whom, as we speak. Because I've said as a media man, the way I look at it, if care is not taken, it might get into blood, it might go over to a bloody civil situation, or civil war, or tribal war. And therefore, the government, the governor of the Northwest region, and the powers that be in Menchum are supposed to deploy troops there to make sure that even the civilians themselves on both sides should be protected. So it's a call for concern, Gina. A very big call for concern.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Fa Elvis, for honoring our invitation. Fellow viewers, thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for your contributions, and a big thanks as well to the technicians who are always there with us in the studio to make sure that the job is wonderfully done. Now, from wherever you're watching us, it's goodbye for now. Hello, you're on the program. Good day to you, sir.
I very appreciate it. I very appreciate all what you are talking about it. Good day and good day to all the viewers of African Media. Thank you, African Media. Thank you for what you are doing. Thank you, Africa.